Thank you all so much for joining today. We're really excited to continue on these discussions with some of our Labster content folks. So to introduce our panel today, I have Francisco, who is a scientific content lead at Labster. He's taught several different environmental science programs and courses at the University of Roskilde in Denmark. And he also has a PhD in ecology, where his dissertation focused on the effects of climate change on marine plants. So welcome, Fran. We also have Elisha, who is a pedagogy strategist and scientific content creator at Labster. She has taught environmental and earth science at universities across Singapore and Australia, and has worked as a learning design researcher for citizen science activities, and has a PhD in geography. And last but not least, we have Albin, who is a content product manager at Labster. He has held various roles at Labster in product management, product development, and has a master's degree in engineering physics. Welcome all. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And I'm excited to ask you some questions and really start peeling back the curtain on sort of what is behind all of our Labster content. We have all of this incredible science content, but what goes into actually being able to create these awesome experiential learning experiences for students? We have over 270 simulations across a variety of scientific disciplines. So my first question is just, how do you choose what topics our simulations are going to cover? How does Labster choose what topics to make simulations on? And whoever sort of feels drawn to answer that question, please go ahead.
I think this is a question for me coming from a product management perspective. I'm working with specifically for high school. So my answer will be a little bit more towards high school, but it's more or less the same. So for high school, we're looking at the NGSS standard, and we're really looking at what teachers need. What topics do they struggle teaching? Where are there a lot of misconception, and where do students really struggle? And we figure this out by running surveys and asking interviews to get a better understanding of where does actually the teacher students benefit from an interactive 3D simulation. But not just asking the questions about where they need. We're also looking at where is a conceptual understanding really require a 3D interactive simulation, because not all topics actually requires a simulation. And I think we can add most value in high school and also in higher ed by not just digitalizing what's happening in the classroom, but actually creating these 3D interactive visualizations that allows the students to connect what they see in the observable world with what is happening on an atomic or molecular level, or magnetic fields or flow visualization, or what's happening in the macroscopic world like our Earth and space, and really help them build those mental models that are required to understand science. And those are the concepts that we're looking for, to help them create models in their head that really helps them think and talk and use science to explain the world around them. So that's really where we're looking to find the concepts that we can see benefit the most from 3D simulations.
Awesome, thank you. So once you sort of decide these topics, we saw an example of what that climate change simulation looks like. So I'm curious, sort of how do we get from having a topic that we've realized is difficult for students to understand, and then are actually able to create these experiential learning experiences? So I don't know, maybe Elisha, from your perspective, from the pedagogy side of things, how you sort of take these concepts and are able to translate them into experiential learning activities.
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me, the principle that lends most to an interactive experiential learning experience is active learning. And so where we aim for the student to be intrinsically motivated throughout the simulation, and they have the agency to be in charge during the simulation. So this agency is what we consider to be key for interactivity, not just clicking a bunch of of buttons in order to get to the next stage of learning. And so this active learning and intrinsic motivation is a collaborative effort within the teams that develop simulations and involving both principles in active learning and game design. For the most part, our main strategy is to implement problem and inquiry-based learning supported by role play and gamification. And these strategies really complement addressing challenges that often come when teaching climate change and environmental science. So, for example, one challenge in teaching climate change is for students to understand the concepts of complex models, that they're dynamic and involve a bunch of interdependent social and environmental factors, and that there's no simple answer, that the world is a complex, dynamic place. And there are many options as to how you can address this. You can go through a list of variables and offer a case study to kind of highlight those interrelationships. But what we have found in simulations is that we can put the student in the situation where they have to observe those dynamic interrelationships themselves to really deepen their understanding. So for example, in the videos that we just saw by Lisa, there was this game with tiles with the globe, the world map represented by each of these tiles. And the students are allowed to kind of play around with the land use. And with different options for land use, they can then kind of see the interrelationships and how they overall impact the global temperature change. And so by introducing a game strategy in the form of a score, the students can then adjust the variables to reach a certain target. And so they have to make those mental models and how those variables are interconnected in order to achieve that target, which is a gamification strategy. But so in other words, the students are kind of doing that, that modeling in the guise of a game, but the same mental connections are that's an example of how we promote interactivity in our games, by kind of translating a complex situation into a game, but kind of encouraging the same cognitive connections being made at the same time.
Awesome, thank you. It's so great to hear about sort of how that process is working behind the scenes. And my next question is, what have you learned in building all of these simulations? And this question is for whoever feels like answering, but what sort of does and doesn't work with students when it comes to creating these experiential learning experiences? So, it sounds like the gamification, some of that stuff that we saw with Lisa's video, that's a really awesome way for students to learn. But is there anything that you have found that sort of works really well or doesn't work as well with students?
I can take this one. Yeah, I mean, there's some of the things that are in the theory, right, that you can read what works in terms of pedagogy, but there's many other things that you discover along the way, like when you're making simulations and you realize, and very important, we also analyze how our simulations perform, right? And we see how students are learning with our simulations, how they're performing with it. So we take that information back and try to see, try to extract, to learn from it, to make our simulations better in the future. And some of the things, like, for example, something that I wouldn't say doesn't work, but it needs to be used in the right context, is something that everyone strives for every time when we start making simulations, is freedom. And freedom, it needs to be, I always like to say that it needs to be meaningful freedom. Sometimes we have the feeling that it's just really nice, just let's leave the students explore and do everything. But sometimes, unless you set some clear guidelines around it, students also get confused and don't know exactly what they need to do, or there's sometimes students that are not as motivated as others are, right, to explore as much. So finding that balance is also super important for us, finding that right balance between freedom and direction in our simulations is really key. And it's something that, I mean, it's taken us a kind of year to find the sweet spot. And even now, right, it's not easy, because it's always, every simulation that we make is almost like a little piece of art, handmade, crafted by our amazing team. I would say that that's one of the things. And here, for example, in the simulation, this example that Lisa has shown us, it's pretty obvious. For me, it's a really good example. I personally, that's personal, also implied in the topic, right? I personally like this simulation a lot. And I think that it hits really well that spot of allowing for freedom, but it's very meaningful. It's very common that I've been teaching students myself in the past, right? And I found myself in the situation of saying, but this is very complex. But you don't have sometimes the tools to actually explain how complex things really are. So mini games like this one that allow the student to have this freedom to do almost whatever they want and see the actual impact that it has. I think that is super powerful and a really good way of complement teaching I mean, I wish I could have used it both in both sides when I was a teacher and when I was a student, actually.
Awesome. I love what you said about, each simulation being a little handmade piece of art, and you try and find that balance every time. So I guess that sort of leads me into my next question is, how are you able to validate that sort of in a simulation? You're saying you want that balance of freedom with some sort of structure. What is the process of making sure that you're actually able to get that balance in the simulation and sort of validating that with students?
I can take it, but please jump in and interrupt me, any of you. No, we put a lot of emphasis in user testing. Basically, we try as much as we can to test our simulations with our actual users, which are the students, right? Throughout the creation process. So we found we use not going to go into too much into this, right? But we use a methodology that is called Agile, which basically it encourages you to test as much as you can throughout the production, not only when you have a final product and everything is ready and for you to deliver, but actually when you have very, very rough versions of your simulations. Just go out, test it, see how the students feel, see how they're interacting with it, record sessions. Sometimes we ask it doesn't need to be a live session, but simply like record, could you please play the simulation and record yourself while you're playing, so we can see how do you interact. Maybe we discover things that we didn't see before. And also, of course, that's on the side of the students, right? But also on the side of the teachers, talking to the teachers. It's very important to us to make sure that we actually teaching what we should be teaching, what they need in the classroom.
Awesome, thank you. And I know Albin, you must mention this as well. In finding out the topics to teach, part of that is also going out and talking to teachers. So yeah, I mean, at Labster, it's definitely really important to all of us to be able to talk to educators and really engage with them and understand what your needs are. And so I want to quickly mention that we do have a community campus that I'm going to put the link in the chat. This is a campus community that you can join whether or not you are using Labster in your classroom right now. This is open to all science educators, all educators. If you're interested in engaging with a community of science educators and engaging with us in working with us on, developing our simulations, testing them, and having the opportunity to really have a voice in this content. That's really important that, Labster is not being created, separate from educators, but with all of the educators that are using Labster as well. So thanks, SJ. I just saw you drop that in the chat.
Can I just add to, can I just emphasize that actually the real need for, we really want to work close with both teachers and teachers that have students that are also interested in being part of, for example, beta testing of simulations as a part of the validation program, as Fran mentioned. And we really want to be able to create simulations together with teachers and really want to have teachers' input so that actually we get something that really works in the classroom together with teachers and students. So I'm really looking for teachers to work with. So please go to the community campus, and we have challenges where you can be part of feedbacking specific learning objectives on a specific simulation, or beta testing simulation, or come with suggestions on topics. Everything like that is very, very much welcomed.
Awesome. Thank you. I see SJ, you hopped on here. Did you want to, I don't know if we have questions, or I can ask, I have more questions if we don't have any from the audience right now.
Yeah, I think we just have a few minutes left. I'm not seeing any questions from the audience yet. If you do have some, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Oh, maybe we just inspired someone. And this, we have a comment from someone who is saying that they were able to use some Labster simulations during the pandemic for free. So yes, certainly it is our mission to support teachers as much as we can. Obviously, we are a for-profit company, so ultimately, need to charge, but do try to offer, support, especially during the pandemic when we know so many teachers were hurting so much. Any other questions?
I also see in the comment there, about expanding into Earth and space science over the past year or so. Our Earth and space science catalog has absolutely exploded. We have a lot more simulations, the climate change one being just one of them. And like we've mentioned, we want to make the simulations that make sense for you. And so I see, suggestions on marine biology. If you join our community campus, you can give suggestions for broad topic areas, specific topics, really whatever you're looking for. And we take that into account then when, Albin is looking at that, looking at all of the teacher feedback when deciding what simulations to create. So I definitely encourage you to use that voice and really be a part of our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. Maybe one more question and then we'll go into the breakout groups.
Yeah, so I would, oh, sorry.
Can I add something though? Just a second. Because I was reading the comment and I would like to address a little bit of it, because I think it's actually important, something that we haven't talked about. In Labster, we're not only about creating new content, which is very important, it's a huge part of what we do, create new content to help teachers, to enable teachers to use them in the classroom and help the students, right? But there's a part there that it's around how it was a little bit challenging maybe to go through the labs. Sometimes I'm not a gamer, I think that the question says, right? And we understand that, and it's actually a big part of the learning that we've done over the years, and it's something that we're actually putting a lot of effort right now as well in improving the simulations that we already have to actually make them easier to navigate over and over. Just wanted to remark that it's not only about creating new content, that we also invest in actually making our already existing content more accessible, easier for everyone.
And I'd also love to very quickly add to that. I know we're running out of time, but we are also working on adding compatibility to be able to play Labster simulations on tablets and lower end Chromebooks. Being able to play on an iPad or a tablet is also a different experience. And as we add that support, that's also going to increase access and make the playing easier as well. So just wanted to add that.